I thought our guys really maximized the bye week. I spent some time on the road, but I was the only coach out, me and Dre. But for the most part, kept my coaches in early in the week. We did a little self-scout of ourselves, offense, defense, special teams. I thought a lot of really good information on that. We kind of did a midweek report on that, flipped our attention to obviously Michigan State during a bye week as well. So no new film coming in on them. Did a lot of prep on them, basically Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then jumped again last night. So excited about that from an injury standpoint. Obviously, you knew about Dylan Rosiak, saw him this morning. Obviously fresh out of the surgery, but everything was very, very positive there and what went into it. So excited for him to start that road to recovery and see where it goes. T-Strain, guy that missed last week's game, was really, really very upbeat about his progress today. He's done some running in the water and then now on land yesterday and had minimal soreness today, so he'll get him into Indy drills tomorrow. Expect to have him back in with us. A couple guys that missed, Joe Barna, T. Brooks. Those guys really, Joe especially, Sunday night was full go, unrestricted and had no setbacks. Was very excited to get him back out there. So should be full throttle going into this week. There's a couple guys that I think the week as it plays out, they've been sore, banged up. We really took it easy on them in a bye week, so we've not seen them out of practice. Wanted to give them Sunday, I guess. Additionally, guys that have played a lot of football for us. Obviously, Miles Scott will miss the first half of the game due to injury, but or not due to injury, due to the ejection. So really, that's the only guy forecasting right now that's a starter that's been permanently won't be not permanently, but won't be with us as a starter in the first half at least. So with that, open it up with questions. I am excited to be a head coach of a team that has put themselves in a position. You always remember the ones in November, and obviously started off with a bump in the road with Minnesota. I think a team that had played very well getting to our game, and then obviously you saw this week playing a team commonly we're going to cross over against Rutgers, and I watched sit there firsthand Saturday and watched the Michigan-Indiana game. Obviously don't know a lot about Indiana because they don't pop on our schedule. Really hadn't seen a lot of them cross over, but watched it with interest because of obviously the Michigan game and what we went through, and to see that go down to the wire. I saw Maryland and Oregon kind of play out back and forth. I was able to get home Friday night. I was at a high school game, local high school game. I got back late and saw the fourth quarter of the UCLA-Iowa game and watched Iowa the week before. I think take Wisconsin to task. So it's just I think in this league there's a lot of really good football teams. To be a 6-3 team, we've obviously lost AP ranking wise, right, to the number 1 and the number 5 team in the country. Lost a heartbreaker to Minnesota. So obviously a 6-3 team that not happy to be 6-3, but in this league where we're at in the world of college football, the way it lays out today, I just don't think you're going to see the amount of unbeaten, one-loss teams, just the parity that's in college football now because of the portal and because of NIL and even the changing of the restructuring of shared revenue. I think in our conference and in the SEC, to see that many quality teams playing each other week in and week out has just really brought a different venue. And even for me during our bye week last week to look at my schedule, my roster as it lays out right now and what's in front of us, we are a very sophomore, junior laden football team. We're the third, I believe, youngest football team in the group of 4. One of the youngest teams in our conference. Just don't lose a lot of seniors. Obviously a lot of things can change, but really excited about not just where our roster is now, but where I think it can go. And in this world that we're going to get into hopefully in sometime in 2025 with revenue sharing, which I think is going to balance that playing field. Hopefully something that's never been done during this modern era, to give everybody kind of a fair share. I think is going to be an awesome time. So super excited about where we are. We're really excited about where we're going. I call these the Bret Moore stats, right? Like he laid out certain things coming out of a bye week. He always does, but also just what we've been able to accomplish over my 4 years of being here and putting us in ties with a lot of times back to the year 2001 team or teams in the past that have done a lot of good things. I'm excited. I get frustrated with sometimes the little bumps in the road that we go through, but to bottom line be able to come out here this Saturday, to have 7 home games and know that we've won 5 of our 6 opportunities and lost a heartbreaker to Minnesota. But I hope the crowd and the people that show up on Saturday realize there aren't a lot of seniors in this year's class, but the guys that are there have put a lot into it. I gave T-Roy Edwards a chance to speak yesterday in front of the team, and I think here's a guy that comes to us from Ohio via transfer of Northwestern to see him play the way he's playing right now and to see the passion that he has and the way his teammates react to him is for me as a head coach to sit in those meetings and to watch that daily is a pretty awesome feeling. So good reminder for all of us of how good we've been able to do things, and hopefully can only get better. So with that, open up really this time 4 questions.
Who's your in-helmet guy defensively without Miles in that?
It naturally defaults to Mac.
Mac, okay.
It's just because he's Miles back up. Yeah. We have done everything with our linebackers up front. So obviously Dylan not there, but with Krutzy, KO. Back when this whole thing started, I knew I had a D coordinator who saw through the lights of the deep. You always kind of, no matter what coordinator I've always had. One of my first defense coordinators, Mike Hankwitz. He was an up front guy, right? And but then I transitioned to Dave Doran, who was up front. Then I went to Chris Ash. Chris Ash was a back end view guy. He was a defensive back coach by experience, so he kind of always saw the game forward. And then the same thing when I came here with Ryan Walters. Ryan saw the game, I believe, from the defensive end back forward. And that's the way Aaron sees it. So I see why those guys commonly default. If I was play calling it, I'd probably go to a linebacker because that's how I see the game and call it. But that would be the guy that would take it back.
Right, Xavier Scott, how's he progressing?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, good question. It was really it wasn't a significant injury, but it was one that was irritated for him, and we didn't set him at all. I didn't practice him at all last week. He is set to go full go tomorrow. Was limited on Sunday, but we limited everybody on Sunday, so I think we should have him with no problem for game done.
Coach, the transfer portal opens in less than a month. But what's the approach going to be? And is there one guy on staff that monitors in the recruiting office that monitors that for you?
Yeah, Jay Kaiser. Ever since I've taken over, I hired him. He was a pro guy that had a number of years' experience both at Tampa Bay and at Miami with 3 different head coaches. He's a guy that had been in my past all the way back to Kansas State, which, even though there wasn't a transfer portal back then, Kansas State lived in that world probably better than anybody through JUCO world and what it was. So Jay has been my point man for the obviously Pat Hamilton oversees kind of everything in the personnel. So Pat, Jay, and I constantly are in communication, have meetings. We have guys that have already gotten in the portal already within our conference that we know are going to be there. There's guys that have notified people there may be a pre-portal, right, which means that when that moment comes, they're expected to jump into the guys that aren't playing or could be somewhere else, guys that have been in our past. So yeah, Jay monitors that and tracks it. And I mean, the thing about the portal when it hits, you can get a call at 6 in the morning. It's also up to the processing of the school he's leaving. So when the school gets their notification, some schools will deliberately hold that as long as possible, trying to talk kids out of it or however they want to look at it. So you really get them at all times of the day.
Coach, you mentioned the recruiting calendar last week,
Mm-hmm.
kind of some of the things that were going on, changes-wise. If you were in charge, if you could make it like perfect for you and other coaches, what would it be like?
You know what? That's a really good question. I think that the NCAA and the powers that be are trying to do as best they can, but there are just certain things that are evolving so quickly that they don't realize what they're doing in the manifestation. Like I've made this point several times. I love being in the homes of the kids that I recruit, and as a head coach, you only get one of those opportunities. And in this class, the 2025 class, I will never have a chance to be in any kid's home before he signs, and to me, that's a travesty. But in December, one of the things that is new this year that I think most college coaches would tell you is going to be a big game change is we can't go out on the road in December.
Okay.
And usually that's when you're in this frenzy because it's up till the signing date, the 3rd week of December. So you're trying to get the ones you haven't got. You're trying to protect the ones that other people are trying to grab. We're just not allowing coaches out in the month of December. And then with that being said, that Monday after championship weekend is going to be the opening of the portal window for the first time. And that's when you can bring those kids on campus. So there'll be a mad scramble to make that happen. We've already qualified. I know there's a lot of teams in the country, but we've already qualified for postseason play. So we've already mapped out what our in theory, bowl prep would be, and even though we won't know the day of the game or any of that stuff until later, but you really truly have a sense right now that, okay, these are the days we're going to practice, this works with the conflict, or it doesn't conflict with our academic schedule. So I think to have December off, I think in the end will be a good thing, but the only byproduct of that, you would hope that, back in maybe June, maybe there's a 10-day window where coaches could go out on the road and see guys on home visits that are committed to you. There's a lot of moving parts. I think one of the and then it gets into so many different dynamics. You got schools like we're a semester-driven school, right? But the guys that are on tri-semesters, they would tell you that they're at an advantage at certain times of the year, but at a disadvantage in others because their classes go to a certain time. Now there's a new rule that allows portal guys or transfer rule guys. They're going to be able to sign a piece of paper that, in theory, locks them into your school. But I asked the question, what if a kid signs 2? And nobody could give me an answer of what's going to happen, right? So it's kind of the wild, wild west. But we'll see it kind of, we'll do our best to unfold.
Well, are you happy with where you're at right now? I know there's work to do in this class, but
Yeah,
happy with where you are?
I think, from a commitment standpoint, I feel good at where we're at. I do think there's 3 or 4 guys that we're hanging fire on that we would love to add in, that continue to have a daily presence with us. There's some factors in that go beyond just the normal recruiting, like who do we have coming back, or the school that they're committed to, what's the situation they're at. You start to see over the last 2 weeks, not only are head coaches getting relieved, but also coordinators are getting relieved, and there's now all of a sudden you maybe had a kid that was committed to a school, and maybe they've had a coordinator change. We do a lot of things in Florida, and obviously things have transitioned to Florida State. There's byproduct and fallout of that. So there's all these different factors that go into it, and then bottom line for us, we're hoping to maintain that the ones we have committed are committed to us and staying with us, but things can literally change over the night. It's been really good for us. We've probably been as hot as we've ever been since I've been here. Got a big one this weekend and an underclassman, right? So for us, the product that you've seen on the field and the byproduct of that is the people coast to coast have noticed as well.
But speaking of, I know you can't speak to 2026.
Yep.
But it feels like the winning has helped, the atmospheres you've had here have helped. Like, how do you feel about the foundation you set in that class?
Well, you hit a very important point. Like, I can't tell you how many kids now talk about the atmosphere we have here on game day, and we talk about a lot about how that affects our current roster, and to be a 5-1 team here at home this year right now with a chance to get to 6-1 this Saturday is awesome. But to have the feeling of that from local kids, right? Even the game as that Friday night, to be on a sideline at a home game for a close school, right? Like, and to hear their students yell things, and there were some other schools over there that weren't getting the same love. That hasn't always been the case, and I think that's a byproduct of what's going on.
Last week, it was reported the SEC is going to still just have 85 scholarships and not go to 105. Do you have any opinion on where the Big Ten should land?
Well, it was interesting because I was actually in dialogue with an SEC coach who wasn't aware of that situation. So what I have learned in this conference, what certain people say sometimes doesn't really come true. I know I'm talking to one man who sits over there that decides what our scholarship count is. We have daily conversations about that. I can't really control what others do. I think the real story, to be honest, is I think there's going to be a certain number of schools that divide scholarships, which has never been done in Division I football, right? So that's an FCS, lower level rule that has been in place for years in that division, right? But now you have a kid that maybe is trying to decide between a full scholarship, maybe at a group of 4, a lower level or a MAC or something, that is not quite Big Ten or SEC, and maybe you can get them for half a scholarship, right? And as opposed to a full scholarship somewhere else. So there's going to be some interesting things, I think, that play out in that world more than the 85.
What jumps out about Michigan State, their identity on offense and defense, and maybe some keys to the game for you guys?
So I've been a big fan of Coach Smith. I've known him indirectly. Brian Wozniak, their tight ends coach at Michigan State, was with him at Oregon State. Woz and I known him since he's a high school kid that I recruited, just love who he is, what he represents. And when he was working for him at Oregon State, I would see him at coach convention and talk to him. Another former player of mine, Josh Oglesby, who's now the O-line coach at Arizona State, worked there as well. And the way those kids talked about Coach, I just knew he was a really good coach. So then getting to know him in meetings and be around him, just super impressed with who he is, what he represents. I think he's great for our game. He cares about the game a lot. Their kids are very well coached, I think, offensively, defensively, and even in the special teams world, you see them, as the year has gone on, try to draw on their players' strengths, try to probably minimize what they're doing and keep the volume lower to try to increase the intensity. I think their quarterback is a very opportunistic player, very, very impressive, very good athlete that can throw the ball accurately, does a lot of good things on the move. Defensively, have a huge respect for their defense coordinator, who was at Minnesota for a number of years, just the way they play, the way they coach, the way they teach them. So yeah, a lot of respect for us going into that locker room and for us to play a Michigan State game at this time of the year, similar to what we had 2 years ago in 2022. Looks like kind of maybe on the same type of day, 10 to 20 mile an hour wind, so it's something we got to be ready for.
Those teams under Michigan State with Lake Antonio, they're super smash mouth. What do you kind of see from this Michigan State team with Jonathan Smith? What are they going to try to do?
Yeah, great question. I think, I don't know if it's stayed on the lines as much as, the last couple of coaches have been at Michigan State, but I would say that what I watched and learned, so I did a lot of work on Oregon State film just because I thought that would be what I saw, right? And that's been very much carried over. So I think what you saw of him at Oregon State is what you're seeing here, especially on the offense side of the ball for sure. I think they're, cut in line with this conference. I think they're very smart. They play physical. I saw that we're number 8 in the country and fewest penalized team. I think Rutgers is number 1. I'd say in this conference, a lot of our teams play really good football and don't beat themselves. And I think Michigan State kind of falls into that category. They've obviously had some issues first year being together, but overall, I just think the makeup of what they want, you see it get more and more real every game. They play their best football the last 3 or 4 games, and it shows why.
But Aaron was talking about how in the NFL early down packages are so different than some third down packages.
On defense.
Defensively, so I'm curious what your experience in the NFL maybe helped inform you and how you guys maybe craft that.
Yeah, a little bit of that turns into a little bit of, as is the case, right? Defensive are always driven by what the offense does. So like, if an offense is on the field and they want to go to line of scrimmage, you obviously can't sub your packages. So that's forced defensive coaches to make their early down packages very similar to their third down packages. And if you sub, one of the common traits that offenses will do, if you sub in and they convert a first down, they'll go right to the line of scrimmage to make you pay a third down package on their early down. So that's the difference between NFL and college. I'm assuming that's probably what he's talking about. I don't want to put words in Aaron's mouth or contradict what he said, but that's probably the driving force more than anything is dictated by what the offense wants to do.
When the playoff was put in, there's a lot of talk about how it de-emphasized bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Given that you're bowl eligible and there's kind of a wide range of Big Ten bowls after the playoff, what are your thoughts on how that all plays out now with 12
Yeah,
teams?
great question. I think it's unknown territory for everybody, right? So there's going to be 4 teams that get into the college football playoffs that are going to play on the road or at home. Even teams that are very good football teams that are going to have a playoff game, and when they're done, right? And I think the part that is really crazy, in this 12-team playoff, everybody's vying, and there's a lot more contention. That our teams are alive longer than ever before, right? And I think it just elevates the play. Like I'm not oblivious to the fact if we were able to, convert a score at the end of that Minnesota game, be able to pull that out, how a 7-2 football team, we'd probably be somewhere in the top 14 right now, based on our strength of schedule compared to everybody else that's out there. So that's how close it is. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it. So I wanted to make our guys realize how close that were to that moment and how we're just one game out. Who knows how the next 3 weeks are going to play out. I made a special interest just, idle time this weekend. So there was 3 teams, LSU, Rutgers, LSU, Louisville, and South Carolina that are all 6-3 that were in the top 20, right? And that kind of just jumped out to me that we're a 6-3 football team that lost to number 5, number 1, and a bowl eligible Minnesota team, right? Like I know that the margin is very, very small, and we got to be able to take better advantage of it. But part of the process is getting our guys to understand how every game matters.
And I know that you do
One more
player
after this.
you do player development all year long, but when you have a bye week and maybe you're trying to get some veteran guys healthy,
Yeah.
do you have some look guys? Did you throw some look guys out there last week?
Yeah,
You were like, hey,
yeah.
these guys can help us.
Yeah, there was for sure. General Hunt will be a guy you see involved. I know I've said him before, but I thought he really had a good week. A couple offensive linemen. We really wanted to look at Des Schuster, a guy who's maybe not truly developmental. He's been with us, but he's been banged up. I definitely think you'll see a little bit more of him in the outside linebacker world. JoJo Hayden continued to come along, but some of the young bucks, right? Like guys you haven't really seen, Rio Sanders, Mario has really had a good, really I'd say the last 3 or 4 weeks, but last week in particular, I thought he really had a good week. You guys don't get to see him. You only got to see him on 1 2-point play and a couple plays at the end of Eastern Illinois. Donovan Leary continues to be very impressive in where he's at, and Trey Petty does too. Trey's had a kind of neat to see those guys play in our system and where they're at. On the defense side of the ball, a guy that I'm really excited to kind of see where he goes, Demetrius John. We've actually played him inside at defensive line. He played a little bit outside backer. He's really had a good month to the back end. Amari as well, and has had a really good, I would say the back 5-6 weeks since our last bye week, has just continued to show up and be very impressive where he is. I'm really excited to see Malachi Hood just because of the injury to Dylan Rosiak. That's kind of thrust him into the spot, and I made a big point. I knew he was going to start on a certain package. It was his first defensive listing as the number one linebacker on a package that we were going to use against Michigan, and I just know what that kid's been through. All the things that led up to his recruitment here, kind of took a chance on us and came out here and worked on that turf, and we offered him a scholarship, then came here, was really in a position. Tore his Achilles, took him out of football for a long time, and then to get him back out there, and I literally said in the team meeting on Friday night, I said, listen, I know when Malachi Hood, I go, what do you want to get called tomorrow? And he named the package that he was a starter on. I said, when that package gets called tomorrow, my bet is Malachi Hood does something special, and he had a fumble recovery on the very first play, right? There's just fun things in coaching. Obviously, winning is fun, but to see kids manifest themselves in front of you and watch them have success, it's those little moments right there that turn into maybe Malachi Hood 2 years from now as an all Big Ten player that we're talking about in the draft, right? Like, those are just those really cool moments that are fun to watch.
Does it affect your
Last
play
one.
much if you might anticipate other teams at this point in year two bringing up 2s and 3s either for depth issue or because they can reserve a red shirt and how you might scout personnel?
I get it. I'm not that.
I'm just saying you might not have a lot of tape on
Guys that they're playing?
guys
Are you-
that might show up in the games.
Yeah, well, it's obviously they've had some injuries the last couple of weeks, so we're tracking guys that they mentioned or talk about. But yeah, you're always going to get some unknowns. And one of the benefits of playing a game in what's going into week 10 for us is we've got a lot of film on them, but they have a lot of film on us, right? So anytime you throw in a new person or a new wrinkle, a new scheme like that's unknown, that's advantageous. But again, now you're testing a commodity that hasn't been out there, right? So. They've had a number of guys really on offense, defense, and special teams show up a little bit more in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So we actually track our opponents just like we have a red shirt tracker for our guys, like who are at that 4 who probably can't play anymore. If they want to play them or that we don't want to play them, we don't know what's going on in their locker room, but we can definitely be aware of that. And on the flip side of it, I know they're probably doing the same to us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.